Confirming that I am audible here from Florida.
Good evening and welcome to AVA Community Energy Board of Directors meeting. Today is June 18th, 2025, and it is 6:05. We'll call the meeting to order. As we have a bond item on the agenda, we will be making sure that all members who are remote are at their prescribed and noticed location so that we can just affirm that for the record. So just be aware of that. In addition, cameras have to be on during this, Cinder, is that correct?
No.
Okay, standard other rules apply. Okay, thank you. So with that, we will go ahead and have roll call, please.
Absolutely, thank you. Allegheny County,
Present.
Albany, Berkeley,
Present.
Dublin. Present. Emeryville, Fremont.
Adrian is quite soft.
Thank you. Fremont, Hayward,
Present.
Lathrop, Livermore, Newark,
Present.
Oakland, San Joaquin County.
Here.
Thank you. San Leandro,
Present.
Stockton, Tracy,
Present.
Union City,
Here.
Community Advisory Committee, Thank you. Piedmont,
Present.
Pleasanton.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. With that, will Vice Chair Anderson lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Please rise if you are able. Thank you very much. With that, we'll be proceeding to item number 3, public comment. This item is reserved for persons wishing to address the board on any AVA-related matter that are not otherwise on this meeting agenda. Public comments on matters listed on the agenda shall be heard at the time that that matter is called. As with all public comment, members of the public wishing to address the board shall be limited to 2 minutes per speaker, and we ask that you complete an electronic speaker card. With that, do we have any public comment in the room? Seeing none, virtual,
There are no hands raised at this time.
and at any satellite location, which I've now added to my repertoire. Okay. With that, public comment is hereby closed, and we'll bring it back. We're going to proceed through the agenda as it is laid out. I just want to mention, you'll note that the regular agenda is kind of spliced with consent in the middle, and that's principally because many of the consent items are related to if this budget passes, so that's kind of why the formatting is such. So talking with Howard, staff did not want to have us doing consent before we had obviously passed the budget that many of those items would relate to. So with that, we'll proceed according to the standard written published agenda. Moving to item number 4, the CEO report, please.
That's all right. Okay. Let me jump into the CEO report as Adrian pulls that up.
I apologize. Before you do, Adrian, or we'll confirm locations after this item, just because I didn't explicitly do that. Great.
This is just an informational, so. Great, thanks, Adrian. So as we typically do, we'll do a quick rundown of the recent subcommittee meetings and then jump to a smattering other matters to update on. The first is our executive committee. Our last one was on Wednesday, June 4th. Members received an update on 2 of the action items for this evening, which was the draft budget and the prepaid financing item. The next XCOM meeting will be on Wednesday, July 2nd at 3 p.m. Next update is just related to meeting location. Apologies that we've been moving around a little bit, but this will continue. So our office space right now is going to undergo some tenant improvements. That's something that's included under our lease after being in this space for nearly a couple of years. There are some things and some improvements that we want to make to the space. So between July 14th and September 12th, so roughly 2 months, we're going to be out of this office space working remotely. Obviously fully operational, but in a remote work setup with some limited office space that we'll be utilizing. So in that time, we've outlined the 4 board meetings that will be in some substitute space at the Rotunda building, specifically in the large conference room located at 300 Frank Ogaza Plaza. So that's downtown Oakland, not very far from here. It's a nice space for our various board meetings. That'll be the July 14th CAC meeting, the July 16th board meeting, the September 3rd Executive Committee meeting, and the September 10th Finance, Administrative, and Procurement Subcommittee meeting. So August, of course, we are on recess. That has a little bit of buffer built into it for our those TIs. So hopefully there will be no other disruptions to our meeting space. We will make sure that we're properly reminding our board members of that updated space. We'll put that in the meeting invite, and we'll send out some reminders ahead of those meetings since we've been moving around a little bit. So that is the update to expect, and we'll remind again as we approach the July 14th date. Next update, wanted to talk a little bit more about the launch to Stockton and Lathrop. We've been updating on that, obviously, given the launch in April. It's been going smoothly. Customers have received their second bill now. In that first bill, second bill timeframes, typically we see a little bit of a jump in the opt-out rate, so that's why we want to make sure we're highlighting this and kind of talking through how those numbers are looking. They continue to be fairly stable, so you can see the Stockton Lathrop and then the total aggregate number hovering around that 5% level, 5.35% in total in terms of percentage opt-outs for number of accounts. Nothing particularly concerning there. I think as I noted, the operational processes have gone smoothly. I think customers have been very encouraging, well receiving of information we've been providing, and eager to learn more. So we've been really active in that launch process and enrollment process, and I think that's been well received as a result of that. Next update, Adrian, if you can scroll down a little bit. Also on a related note, just wanted to highlight, I recently had the opportunity to be interviewed by Courtney Wood of the Downtown Stockton Alliance. That was on June 11th. I did provide a link for that. It was a good 45-minute, 50-minute interview. A lot of good dialogue and questions. I think the audience there is really focused on some of the local government officials and staff members and such. So just another outlet and a really nice way to continue to engage with the city of Stockton. I think as we've done more and more expansions, we've found really effective ways to sort of engage and make sure our name is getting out there and people are getting familiar with our brand and what a CCA is. Moving on to the Fremont residential transition to Renewable 100. We made some updates on this before. There's a lot of information here. I'm not going to walk through all of it, but the R100 transition is just ahead of us, happening in August. Obviously, that is focused on the residential and commercial industrial, the residential customers. The commercial industrial customers will be next year, so we've kind of staggered it as we've discussed in the past. So as we're approaching the residential transition to R100, we want to make sure we're in front of the customers. They understand what their opt-down or opt-out, of course, opportunities are, as we're not forcing customers to make this change unaware to them. So we've been engaging closely with the city staff members to get the appropriate mailers out there to notify customers of that transition. As it is a big transition, is a big load for us. We've updated the web form so that allows customers to obviously take really simple actions if they want to opt down. The numbers, of course, right now are very, very low, but we're doing the mailing process right now, making sure to get that out there very imminently. And I think following that, we may see some more activity there, which is what we've experienced in the past with other cities doing that transition. And then we've just highlighted some of the events specific to Fremont that we're going to be attending to make sure that we continue to stay sort of front and center with customers to sort of explain and educate them on what's happening there. Can scroll down a little further, Adrian. Thank you. The next unrelated update is related to San Joaquin County and an item that we brought forth to the executive committee back a few months ago, just to talk about the enrollment timing. This is just a brief update to state that we have pushed out this item a couple times. We've been really closely engaged with Supervisor Rickman and his staff just about that timing, some of the pros and cons of enrolling those customers in different months and some of the complexities that we're dealing with. The latest one, which I'll talk about a little bit more in the budget item, is just related to that PCIA proposed decision and the error filing that occurred. So there's some unique dynamics there, certainly for our agency as a whole, but specific to San Joaquin County and the enrollment timing as well. So we've been continuing to actively dialogue with them and just talk about what is the optimal timing. So we've continued to push that particular item out a little bit. So we're not going to discuss that today. We're going to continue to engage with the staff there through July and expect we'll probably bring that item in July for a public discussion item. Next item is related to Resilience Hub focus groups. As we're aware, we awarded a community innovation grant to the Emerald City Collaborative, which is overseeing a broader grant process with a number of sort of sub-community-based organizations that are engaged there. Resilience Hubs, of course, is a topic that we've been discussing for a few years now, an area of a lot of importance and interest to our community organizations, to our CAC, and of course the board has focused on that as well. We just wanted to highlight some of the activity that's happening in that space specific to this grant. They've hosted 3 focus groups over the last month or so. One of those was virtual, and then we did 2 in-person focus groups, one in Oakland and one in Stockton, so covering some different territories there. We had close to 200 participants in 36 community-based organizations, CBOs, attending those workshops. So very well attended, a lot of interest, a lot of activity there. Good active discussion about the types of services that folks are seeking or interested in from Resilience Hubs. Good positive feedback on the approach that we're taking and the proposed definition for what would be eligible to some of the incentives and such that we're designing right now. So more to come there. We're likely to come forward to the board with some more information about the definitions, the eligibility, and things like that in the fall timeframe, just ahead of launching that program later this year. The last update here is just our typical list of upcoming community events. I won't list them out, obviously, but continue to be sort of spread throughout our territory, trying to stay active in the summer, of course, and just continue to engage with our community members and educate on who AVA is. And that is it for me.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that report. So are there any clarifying questions by any members of the board in the room related to the CEO report? Seeing none, are there any clarifying questions by any member online related to the CEO report? Seeing none, we'll open it up for public comment. Are there any public comments in the room for the CEO report, item number 4? Please approach the podium at this time. Seeing none, online, are there any public comments for item number 4?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, we'll close that. And at any satellite location? Seeing none, we'll close public comment on item number 4. This is an informational item, so I think this concludes that at this time. We're going to pause here to confirm remote locations, please. I apologize for getting a little ahead of it. I think we just have 3 we have to confirm, right? Are you going to do that,
Sure.
please?
Newark, may you please state your location?
35653 Scarborough Avenue.
Thank you. And San Joaquin County. May you please state your location, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Larch Clover Community Center, 11157 West Larch Road in Tracy.
Okay. Thank you. San Leandro? San Leandro?
Hi, so I'm here at the Marriott in Tampa, Florida, in the business center.
Your address, please?
I think it's 510 Water Street,
505.
Thank you. 505? Water Street?
505 Water Street.
Oh, and both are listed. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
I think that's it. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for that little procedural element. We're going to proceed then to now item number 5, the CAC report. Welcome. You can do it from any spot. Yeah, feel free.
Hi, my name is Mickey Souza. I'm with the CAC, and I'm the vice chair. And unfortunately, Ed couldn't make it today, so I'm filling in for him. I'm going to just touch upon basically 3 items here. The first one was the budget. So we did go through the budget presentation. I'm going to save that the comments for the budget presentation. But we also saw the second item was the drivers of PG&E rate and cost growth, which is something that's been really bugging us. We've been seeing a lot of the rates go through the roof, and families and people who are struggling with their utility bills. And we wanted to see if we could understand it better, because it's very tricky to maneuver our bills and try to discern what's going on there. So we did have a wonderful presentation by Michael and Claire, I think her name was. But they explained what seems to be, what seems to be the wildfire hardening, the undergrounding, all of the other line items that PG&E seems to be talking about. And the numbers just don't add up, because it seems like they're doubling and tripling the transmission and distribution costs for delivery. And so we're looking more into this. We are asking for ways to for more transparency. We want to see what's going on. We should be seeing what's going on, and that's something that one of the ad hocs is deeply embedded in right now. So the term reasonable is not reasonable as far as what we're seeing. The PC remains understaffed, according to the AVA staff, and contributes to a lack of strong public advocacy from their agency, which means greenlighting a lot of things. And in our minds, hurting our organization as well as our customers. The CAC members recommend collaborative action, advocating for efforts with other CCAs to challenge rising costs for the customers. And some strategies include exploring a buyout of the PCIA for AVA customers. We've been in touch with Richard McCann, who is notable in this arena, and so we've been having some meetings with him. Launching a public relations campaign similar to Marin Clean Energy's initiative to highlight unchecked cost increases, lack of transparency, and the complexity of PG&E's expenditures, again, transparency. And I actually started something with the CCA today, trying to find the other chairs to help us with some of our efforts with the PCIA initiatives that are threatening us. So our ad hocs, there's two of them. As you know, there's one that's LDBP, which is a long-term business plan, and the affordability ad hoc. The Energy Affordability Ad Hoc Committee met to discuss the PCIA challenges affecting AVA, and this is where we met Richard McCann. And the members emphasized the need to collaborate with CalCCA in advocating greater transparency and legislative action to improve energy affordability for all customers, referencing the JPA framework as a basis for collective advocacy, which is how we started out. The Local Development Business Plan Ad Hoc Committee reviewed concerns about transparency and AVA's initiatives, particularly regarding public access to key information. Discussions included potential strategies such as virtual power plants, on-bill electrification resources, and alternative revenue streams, including asset development and out-of-territory subcontracting to strengthen AVA's financial position while protecting ratepayers, in essence, using technologies that are emerging and at hand. Additionally, the LDBP ad hoc chair identified that some of the original LDBP documents had not been migrated to the AVA website, and so we've asked for them to migrate it so that we can see the original documents that started us all out back in 2015, and we emerged in 2018. So those documents, if you've taken a look at them, there's a lot of research. There's a lot of heart and blood and sweat and tears that went into them. So we would like to see them more at the forefront to see if maybe some of them are still valid, and that's what the LDBP ad hoc committee is doing right now. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Are there any questions of the CAC report by members in the room at this time? Yes, Berkeley. Do you mind
Thank you
coming?
so much for the report. I was just curious. Oh, thank you. I was curious if you could elaborate about MCE's initiative in relation to a public relations campaign to highlight unchecked cost increases, et cetera, in regard to PG&E's expenditures.
Yeah, unfortunately, the MCE's plan is something that I'm a little bit less versed on, more ignorant on, and I am trying to get in touch with the MCE chair to do some collaboration. One of the things that we're hoping to do is perhaps send one of our members from the CAC to the Cal CCA next year so that we can get in touch and stay in sync. We feel that we've been less active and we want to be more active and to help Ava with our technical assistance. So we're here.
Thank you.
Any additional questions by members in the room? Oh, sorry. All right, members online? Yes, Mr. Rickman. Oh, we apologize. We can't hear you unless you're leaning closer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right. Sorry about that. In regards to PG&E, the rate increases, and PUC, are you doing anything to advocate in Sacramento?
Oh, we are touching base with some of the northern CCAs. I'm not entirely sure who the chair is yet because I don't believe they have a community advisory committee. So we're just trying to work within our own group first. But eventually we want to reach out and basically gather force together.
Because I know, I mean, if there's going to be a change, it's going to have to come from on the legislators in Sacramento. I know Gallagher, AB 286 is one thing that came out of committee to help reduce cost. And you mentioned the PUC, and let's just be honest, they raised the rates for what 7 times in the last year for PG&E. It's a rubber stamp. There's no oversight or very limited oversight. So if there's going to be any changes, it's going to have to come from our legislators in Sacramento. So it'd be great if we would put it, monitor some of these bills and, get behind it that way and assist whatever we can do.
One of the things that we're planning on doing is, as far as our immediate, well, you'll see in the presentation with the budget, our immediate concern is the PCIA changes. And we're afraid that this will put Ava and the rest of the CCAs at risk. And what we're doing is we're initiating a public response by asking the word to be put out by the other CACs and our own personal friends and neighbors. And we have a letter, and I was going to provide the letter later, but I can provide the letter that our own Ava staff member Sam Sadie wrote for the PCIA to submit public comment. We have the link, so it's really easy to do. And so I'm going on Nextdoor. Jim Lutz is going to the Sierra Club 350.org. He's getting his buddies on, and so we're going to just flood the CPUC site with mention of our distrust and the poor decisions of going forward with the PCIA. That won't be the last. First of all, it won't be the last attempt by PG&E to make these changes, and second, it won't be the last time we should gather together and collaborate and see what other CCAs are doing to make ourselves stronger, to fight climate change, and to increase our renewables and access to them.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions by members online at this time? All right. Thank you. We'll see if we have public comment. Do we have any public comment on the CAC report, item number 5 in the room? Please approach the podium. Seeing none online.
There are no hands raised at this time.
And at any satellite location. Seeing none, we'll close public comment on item number 5 and that item and move to item number 6. This is the 2025-26 budget. It is an action item for my fellow colleagues, and it's to review and approve the budget for the fiscal years just mentioned. And I believe you're presenting, Howard? Okay.
Okay, so we have, of course, reviewed the draft budget now a number of times in May as well as June. This is an action item. This is in line with our typical timeline each year for approving the budget going into a new fiscal period. There are some meaningful changes. I'll really focus this presentation on what has changed from prior presentations and not walk through everything that was previously presented. Starting, you can go to the next slide, Adrian. First couple slides, just a really quick summary of what has occurred and what has changed materially since previous presentation. So first is just 2 days after our last full board meeting, the CPUC did issue a proposed decision on the PCI reform. So what we anticipated did happen. We'll talk a little bit more about that in detail, but they did issue that, and that decision will get voted out 30 days later. So June 23rd is the date that will get voted out, and AVA has filed comments on that and taken some action that I will also elaborate on. Next is, as already previously noted, PG&E did file their ERA filing on May 15th. That was a preliminary indication of rates for 2026. It's noteworthy that that came out before the proposed decision, so it does not incorporate the proposed decision impacts into the rate forecast. So unfortunately, a lot of that is not fully useful, but of course it's a multi-100-page document, so there's a lot that comes from that in terms of assumptions and inputs that we use for our modeling, but it does use some outdated market price benchmarks as a result of that coming out of end of 2024. So it's outdated both because that's standard process looking at utilizing 2024 market price benchmarks, but it's particularly out of date because it doesn't incorporate any of the PCI reform aspects. So there's a lot of modeling work we have to put into this, which just adds a little bit more uncertainty into the forecast scenarios. The last set of bullets that I'll highlight here are specifically the changes to the budget. So we continue to provide 2 budget scenarios just to sort of show some illustrative examples, just as we did before. However, both of those scenarios now have the PCIA reform incorporated. Previously, we had one with it, one without. Both of these scenarios have it in there because of the proposed decision that came out. But we do assume different market prices, even with a known framework for the PCIA. Market prices and uncertainty as to where market prices will go will drive a lot of variation in the dynamic for PCIA and rates. So we do continue to show 2 budget scenarios, but we'll seek approval for one of them, of course. The other noteworthy change is we did lower some of our operating overhead expenses, and we did lower some of our procurement costs. We did that to try to, of course, find ways to sort of manage the budget deficit. On the overhead side, we shaved about $1 million, so modest, but again, overhead is a fairly small percentage of our overall operating expenditures. And on the procurement side of things, we implemented the compliance period procurement methodology that incorporates about $16 million of savings there. So meaningful, but obviously we're looking at a material deficit as well that we'll talk through. Otherwise, both scenarios have the same exact operating expenses. So really what changes is the rates based off of market price benchmark assumptions. The last thing that we assumed, which I touched on briefly in the CO report, is that related to San Joaquin County enrollment timing, that is still up for discussion. We've been engaged with Supervisor Rickman and staff on that. So more to come, but we have assumed a May enrollment timeframe. That is a modest push from what we had previously presented, which is March. And I'll talk a little bit through about that as we go forward as well. Next slide, Adrian. So this is what we'll be seeking in terms of approval tonight. We want to approve the base case budget. That is our best estimate of market prices and some of the regulatory action. And then it does assume we are seeking approval to utilize the GASB 62 Rate Stabilization Fund to offset any potential fiscal year deficit. We'll see some of those forecasts, but it's approximately a $35 million deficit that we're forecasting. Sub-bullet there is we anticipate that we'll bring forward an item in the July-September timeframe to discuss this fiscal year, 24-25 surplus. So we're currently forecasting about $110 million. It's actually 107 or so as the latest estimate, so not quite greater than $110 million. So we will revisit that. We'll bring that forward in the July-September timeframe. That's not an action item we're seeking tonight, but just wanted to highlight that. Okay, you can jump forward a couple slides, Adrian. So this is just a little bit of a schedule of the PCIA rulemaking and the ERA process. I touched on some of this already in terms of the PCIA rulemaking. We did file comments. We are considering some further actions to take beyond this time frame, as if necessary, if things are not adjusted in the final decision itself. I'll defer on that for right now. And then on the ERA filing, you can see the date that it was filed, and then the other bullets just sort of highlight typical process. October, there's an updated filing. That will, of course, be a meaningful filing because it will incorporate the PCI reform aspects. It will have updated market price benchmarks. It'll really give us a very strong sense of where 2026 will be in terms of rates. I should also note that we are also filing comments on the ERA. So there's a lot of assumptions that PG&E makes in the ERA filing itself as well that can have implications on rates and PCIA. Both ourselves and CalCCA make filings there. That's sort of standard course of business every year, but particularly this year because 2025 was a new slice of day RA methodology. There's more that needs to be sort of discussed and filed and sort of advocated for on behalf of CCA. So a lot of those things do have implications on rates and PCI. We have to make certain assumptions, of course. Next slide, Adrian. Great. So this is just highlighting what came out of the proposed decision. This is something that we presented previously, so I won't walk through every detail, but it's really focused on the resource adequacy market price benchmarks. That is an input, a key input into the PCIA. And so the proposed decision discussed reforming that methodology. And these three bullets, sort of these sub-bullets, sort of highlight the changes there. It's a longer transaction history to build a longer data set on what is used for calculating the market price benchmarks for RA. It also makes some adjustments to system local flex RA, and it makes some adjustments for how to account for sort of affiliate swaps or sleeve transactions. All that boils down to the RA MPBs, market price benchmarks, are expected to go down, and as a result of that, PCI is expected to go up, and so that squeezes AVA's headroom. Okay, I think that's it there. You can go to the next slide. This slide has not been adjusted previously, but we do want to highlight again the meaningful impact that we're looking at in terms of this PCI reform. So over the course of calendar year 2026, we will see roughly, we're estimating $187 million impact as a result of this PCI reform. So again, that's going into effect in 2026, but it accounts for both this reform adjusting how PCIA and rates are set in 26. It also accounts for a true up for 2025. So it is retroactive in nature in that regard. So which is why it's so meaningful in terms of its impact in 2026. Important to note that PCIA is going up as a result of this reform in the methodology, but it's also going up just because of softened market prices in general. So if there was no change whatsoever to the methodology itself, we are seeing softer prices that would result in lower rates and higher PCIA. So you get a little bit of a compounding effect as a result of that. Next slide, Adrian. This is the last slide on the PCIA section. Really, the main point here is the three different graphs are different types of energy products. We have RA, resource adequacy, we have brown power, and we have RPS, renewable portfolio standard, or renewable energy specifically there. The dark blue bar is the forecasted market price benchmark for each of these energy products for each of these respective years. And you can see the light blue bar always comes in a bit different, sometimes higher, sometimes lower. And I think the key takeaway here I really want to highlight is that, one, market prices are quite volatile year to year. We have seen that over the last 5 years here. And two, they are really difficult to forecast. So while we do our best job to forecast that in this budget, we make assumptions. You have to do that. Given significant volatility, it is quite difficult to predict where it's not difficult to predict where rates will necessarily go because you're going to make an assumption it's going to set your rate. But ultimately, it's going to get trued up, and where that true up will be is really hard to predict. It's either going to be higher or lower than what you forecast. I can assure you it's not going to be spot on. So unfortunately, that's the world we live in terms of volatility, and I think these graphs help to illustrate that point. Okay, you can jump forward to slide 10. A lot on this slide. This is a slide that we showed previously. I'll highlight a few points here. One is, again, because market prices are softening, we are seeing adjustments to rates even without PCI reform. When you add in PCI reform, that is exacerbated. So you will have a higher PCIA, you generally see lower rates, and you see our headroom, Ava's headroom specifically, squeezed. So the bottom left shows fiscal year information, and the bottom right is calendar year information. So naturally, when you blend 25 and 26, 25 being a high rate year, 26 being a forecasted softer rate year, you get a much more balanced sort of fiscal outlook in the bottom left bar chart. The two right bar charts for each of these graphs is what we'll talk about most. That's the upside and the base case scenario. Again, both of these incorporate PCI reform, but we're assuming different market price benchmarks in each of those. You can see in the fiscal year period, there's not that significant of adjustment when you start blending multiple calendar years. You can see in the calendar year bar chart on the bottom right, there's a little bit more noticeable squeezing of the dark blue bar, which represents Ava's average rates and our headroom. Unfortunately, you can also see that the margin line, that orange line, in the fiscal year is modest. It's a slight deficit. We'll talk a little bit more about those numbers, but in the bottom right, you can see there runs a material deficit there. So that's what we're sort of managing through. That is one of the benefits, of course, having mid-year calendar year, because you get to blend multiple calendar years, and that helps you manage the volatility inherently in that true-up process that you see year to year. But obviously, you have to think about where will rates go in future years as well, and think about how that balances out. And again, difficult to project where 2027 rates will be. That's not included here. So this really goes into 2026 timeframe. The other thing I'll just note is, as you look at trends over the course of the last 6, 8 years, you can see in the 2019 to 2022 timeframe, and actually I'll look a little bit more on the calendar year bar chart, but the 2019 through 2021 timeframe, rates were softer then. And then as you look at 2022 going through 2025, rates increase significantly. And when rates go up, market prices are, that's driven by market prices going up across the various energy products. And you can see PCIA generally goes down there. That increases our headroom. Ava's margin, of course, in those scenarios increased. And again, we put a lot into our reserves. We put a lot, we increased our discount, and we were able to distribute on-bill credits to our customers throughout all of those years. As prices go down, which is something that we do expect and anticipate, prices are cyclical. There's volatility there. 2026, we're forecasting that to come down. We did anticipate that to happen, of course, at some stage. It's always difficult to predict when that will happen, of course. That's when your headroom really gets squeezed. That's where, of course, we're in a relatively good situation because we do have a strong balance sheet, because we do have ample reserves to help manage and weather through this cyclicality. And obviously, we'd anticipate obviously rates stabilizing a bit there, energy costs is decreasing, and Ava, of course, will get the benefit of that as we continue to go out there and procure energy. It's noteworthy, of course, for 2026, it's particularly challenging. This type of environment is particularly challenging because we've been putting on hedges in a high-priced environment. When that happens, that's where your headroom really gets squeezed, and it can result in a bit of a deficit here. But of course, an important reminder is when you're in the 2022, 23, 24 timeframe, we have a lot of in-the-money hedges, and that's why our reserves were so strong, and we had strong budget surpluses for those particular years. So while it's certainly concerning that we're running a deficit for this fiscal year, as a reminder, obviously these things balance out over a multi-year period, so that's really important to take into account. Okay, we'll go to the next slide and really start talking about the numbers for this particular budget now with all that as context. So this is, as we've presented in the past in terms of its layout, so the two columns to the left are budget and actuals for 2025. That's this current fiscal period. You can see the actuals are actualizing about $107 million, so very healthy, well above what we had budgeted. And then you can see the two columns to the right. Those are, of course, the focus of this discussion. You have the upside and the base case. And really the base case is where I'll really draw your attention. It does show a total net revenues of 0, and we'll elaborate on that a little bit. But this does incorporate a distribution of roughly $35 million from our budget stabilization fund. So that's incorporated in the total operating revenues. That's coming from our GASB 62, which is a revenue deferral account. we release those in a deficit year that goes into your operating revenues and that balances out to zero, which is why it reflects zero as opposed to a negative number. Previous draft budgets, we did reflect that without a rate stabilization distribution, so it showed a negative number, but in this case, because it is the actual budget that we want approved, we need to show that release, and so it shows a zero there. I believe I've highlighted all other items here, so we can go to the next slide, Adrian, slide 12. Again, this is a summary of some of the key assumptions here. We did cover this previously, but I'll highlight a few items. This does not incorporate any change to value proposition, something that we had discussed in the previous meeting, so nothing incorporated here. It's a typical 1% uncollectible rate, so no change there. In terms of procurement targets, we are assuming the board approved 81%, but this does incorporate the compliance period methodology, so we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. We do have assumed San Joaquin County enrollment begins in May. This is to be finalized, of course, but that's towards the end of the fiscal year. So any potential changes that may come from further conversations that we have there wouldn't meaningfully impact this fiscal year's budget. So that's worth highlighting. We do anticipate use of the rate stabilization fund that is incorporated here. And then staffing and local development budgeting has not changed from previous presentation. So 7 new incremental headcount and an allocation of roughly $10 million to the local development fund. Next slide, Adrian. So this is sort of highlighting some of the different tools that we had. We presented most of this information previously. On the left side, to mitigate the forecasted deficit, this is what is already incorporated. So we have the compliance procurement methodology. We've lowered some of the local development funding that we've allocated this year relative to prior years. So around $10 million this year. In the last couple of years, it's been around the $25 million level. We did reduce our personnel hiring. Previously in Upside, we had about 14 new hires. In this scenario, we have now 7. We tried to reduce some of our overhead operating expenses. Again, overhead operating expenses account for 6 to 8% of our overall operating expenses. So relatively small percentage, obviously relative to energy procurement, but we did try to shave a little bit off there in light of the deficit. And then lastly, we do utilize our budget stabilization fund to offset the forecasted deficit. Of course, that will assuredly actualize at a different level. So what we ultimately utilize, we will see it, but we will certainly inform the board of as we continue to monitor the year and how it moves forward. On the right side, we just wanted to present as we continue to monitor how this fiscal year proceeds, particularly as we get into the mid-year timeframe, because that's when rates will get reset going to 2026. We're going to be watching that very closely, and we'll bring forward additional items to the board for further consideration, depending on what direction that looks like it's going in. We can consider further adjustments to the extent that we're seeing anything concerning. Those adjustments could be adjustments to the customer value proposition. We'll talk about how that gets quantified and some of the options there. We could talk about further adjustments to procurement targets, adjustments to San Joaquin County enrollment timing. Again, that's not going to meaningfully impact the next fiscal year because it's assuming May, and so any delays there are not going to impact the fiscal year that much. And then further consideration of any reduced spending that we may want to discuss. And then the last note I'll just say is, of course, we want to continue to look out with a longer-term forecast. As I've noted, there's a lot of assumptions that go into this. It's difficult to predict where energy prices will be in a couple of years, but we are continuing to update our modeling. There's a lot that needs to go into that from what came out in the AIR filing, the PCIA filing. So more work to be done there, but I know that in our XCOM, there were discussion about making sure that we have good visibility going into future periods to understand just how destabilizing some of these changes could be and what we may want to plan for and account for on a longer-term horizon. So that was, of course, important feedback that we heard, and we are actively working on that. So more to come on that front. Next slide, Adrian. So we'll go into a little bit more detail with a handful of slides, and then that will be it. On this slide, we talk about quantifying what is the adjustment to revenue based off of changes to the value proposition. We presented this before, but the numbers shifted a little bit in light of the rate forecasts and the PCI forecasts getting updated, of course. But generally speaking, the numbers are sort of in line with what we anticipated before. If we make adjustments of 1% to our Bright Choice value proposition, That's related to our discount to PG&E. For the first half of the year, it's about $4 million. In the second half of the year, because rates are coming down, that adjustment is smaller, so that's $3 million. And for every quarter-cent adjustment to the premium to PG&E for R100, that's about $2.7 million. It's about even for the first half of the year. Second half of the year is $2.8 million. So gives you a sense of those types of impacts. Again, this is not incorporated into the budget, but to the extent we saw anything concerning going forward and we wanted to or felt a need to make adjustments to value proposition, gives you a sense of what that would amount to. Okay, next slide. Slide 15 is related to our compliance period procurement methodology. I know this is an eye chart. Apologies for that. We don't need to read through all of this, but it's intended to be more of a reference deck to elaborate on some of this. The table to the bottom right is our 2024 power content label. Not mailed out yet, but is finalized in terms of the numbers. You can see PG&E's power content label in blue, and then both our Bright Choice and our Renewable 100. As you can see with PG&E's numbers, their renewable energy is around 23%. Definitely highlight worthy because they are utilizing that sort of banked methodology where they had renewable energy generation in previous years. They bank those RECs, and then they utilize them for compliance period in future years. So in 2024, they had a particularly low level. That is 23% is technically below the compliance level, but they were compliant on their RPS obligations because they use banked RECs, but that doesn't come through in the annual power content label itself. You can see their large hydro was about 12%, their nuclear was around 63%, and natural gas is 2%. We've, of course, discussed this in the past. Their generation exceeds their load, so they do have sort of the flexibility to choose what resources to disclose on their power content label. I won't, of course, refresh on the discussions we've had related to nuclear allocation, but you can anticipate in 2025, these power content labels will change pretty dramatically, where PG&Es will likely reduce significantly on nuclear, and I would anticipate for natural gas that would increase significantly. Some of the other things are really difficult to predict in terms of what they will have for the renewable energy because we don't really know what they'll bank and what they'll do there and what they'll sell. On our power content label, we well exceeded our targets. Our target was around 81%. We procured renewable energy large hydro totaling 96%. We did that. That occurred for a few reasons. One, it was a really healthy budget year, of course. So understand the importance of this and trying to exceed our targets. We felt that that was a healthy cushion to have. The other important thing is we generally have a conservative estimation process because we don't want to miss that target level. We see that as a floor, and so we've never missed that historically, and so and that's by design. Added to that is the fact that we have more generation projects coming online, and because we have a conservative estimation process, we assume closer to the sort of contractual obligations that our counterparties have to sell renewable energy. But the reality is when you sign these 20-year PPAs with a new solar farm, it can generate, say, 15% more than the contractual obligation based off of how that project comes online, how they're optimizing. And you typically assume a lower number, both because we have a conservative estimation process, but also because in its early years, there's usually some stuff you have to tinker with. You have to make sure it's performing, and it's just harder to estimate. And so the good news is those projects generally overperformed, and that's part of the reason, again, that you see us well exceeding that target 81% for power procurement levels. I think that's it here. Let me just make sure I didn't miss any highlights. Great. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. So the next slide is just talking a little bit more about this compliance period methodology. So the typical RPS process is 3 to 4 year compliance periods. The graph to the bottom right is an illustrative graph, but it represents the compliance periods, the actual compliance periods that RPS has. So you can see some of those bands are a little wider, some a little narrower. So for state RPS purposes, which is our legislatively mandated, you can see there are 3 to 4 years, and they kind of ramp up over time. So despite having compliance period, of course, those targets do increase over the years, as is outlined and obligated by SB 100. If we were to consider a compliance period methodology for our voluntary procurement, which does exceed the RPS obligations, this is sort of what it would look like. Because in 2024, we exceeded by 15%. In 2025, 2026, you could see we could make adjustments to procure a bit less, utilizing our overprocurement from 24. This is a means to help save on some of our procurement costs or reduce some of our procurement targets for 25, 26, while over the course of a procurement period, still hitting our 81% sort of board approved level as we get to 2030. So that allows some flexibility to manage the variable nature of the resources we have. And obviously, as we have more of our long-term contracts come online, and as we step up our levels in terms of our procurement levels, that variability is anticipated to increase. And so having this tool will allow us to make sure that we're not just always over procuring, particularly important, obviously, in years where we're experiencing or forecasting a deficit. I'll note we have incorporated some savings into our budget with this methodology based off of feedback from prior board meeting that seemed very receptive to this concept and idea. But I do want to acknowledge we don't have a full methodology fleshed out or approved by the board yet. So I recognize it's a little bit out of order. Ideally, we, of course, would have that methodology clearly outlined, approved, and then we would bring something forward like this. But in light of the timeliness of this budget needing to get passed, we have assumed certain adjustments here given the feedback, and we will bring forward a more detailed policy in July for discussion and action to actually formalize what this looks like. The last thing I'll just note on this methodology is that our 2030 target for 100% clean energy, obviously a really, really critical focus of our agency. It's important to note the 24/7 emissions accounting methodology that we've talked about and highlighted in a few meetings. That is something that we do see on the horizon in the coming years. So in addition to these anticipated changes, I just want to flag that in the course of the next year or so, I do expect to bring forward more also meaty and material updates to what that accounting methodology looks like, which is sure to have impacts on our general targets and how we approach procurement. But it's a little early right now to say exactly what that will look like. Quite frankly, there's still a lot of detail that the CEC needs to work out to even know how that's going to get implemented and accounted for systems-wise, et cetera. So more to come on that front. Next slide, Adrian. This slide was previously presented. I'm certainly not going to walk through, but for transparency's sake, we did want to report on what our current budget stabilization fund looks like, our rate stabilization fund. This is our GASB 62 revenue deferral fund specifically. That allowed us to defer on revenues from prior years and release it in deficit type years. We currently have a balance of $57.6 million. There's various uses there related to budget stabilization, related to our solar and storage incentive program. We will typically defer revenue related to our own bill credits to release in the following year when we're actually issuing those credits. And we also have a portion for clean energy, long-term clean energy investments that we had made on a particular PPA from a few years ago. So there's a few different use cases there that are outlined here. What we're talking about, of course, is the rate stabilization portion of this. And as I already noted, I do anticipate bringing forward an item for the board to consider and discuss allocating a portion, some, if not all, of our current surplus into this fund as well, but that's for future discussion. But we, as noted, of course, we do incorporate the use of rate stabilization in this year's, in this particular budget to offset the forecasted deficit. Next slide, Adrian. The remaining slides are really repeat slides, so I'm actually not going to walk through these, but I did just want to highlight that the change is really as it relates to some modest operating overhead operating expenses that were reduced, so close to about $1 million. So that kind of is sprinkled throughout these various buckets. So I wanted to highlight that. I don't think it's necessary to cover each and every one of those because it's sort of shaving 20 grand here, 30 grand here, 50 grand here from various needs. And then the slide after that, Adrian, on this slide is related to our energy costs. So we did reduce this by that $16 million that we talked about related to the compliance procurement methodology. Other items have not changed. We did have a couple slides on the local development spending that we previously presented, just left that in there because it's always an area of interest. And then you can just jump to slide 23. That'll be the final slide. So in conclusion, just to summarize, we're seeking approval for the presented base case budget. That reflects our best estimate of the market prices. It is also a more conservative estimate relative to the upside. It assumes implementation of the compliance period procurement methodology. It also assumes utilization of a portion of our rate stabilization fund. And we will, of course, closely monitor the budget through these next 6 months as we approach 2026 to see if there's any pertinent updates or concerns arising where we feel that we may need to take any further adjustments. And that is it.
I will, Chair's prerogative to say thank you very much for putting this together. As we've walked through it, we've seen a lot of changes, a lot of variability. So my thanks to staff for working through it. And yeah, definitely a more complex year. So with that, we'll go for clarifying questions by members in the room. We may have public speakers after. So clarifying questions. Yes, Hayward, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the budget. We also got to see it at the executive committee. And one of the things we talked about at the executive committee was the difference between the rate stabilization fund and the budget reserve. And so I was just wondering, you're talking now about putting all or most of the surplus into the rate stabilization fund, but then how do you keep sort of building the reserve? Like where's the difference between the surplus and what goes in to what pot?
Absolutely. They are different. Thank you for highlighting that. So our reserve fund and policy is something very formalized. I like to use the analogy of that's sort of your earthquake fund. You want to have that there stored up. The reserve fund,
okay.
yes, correct. And so if that's for catastrophic instances, you don't want to use that, generally speaking. Credit rating agencies look at your reserve fund, and generally speaking, they don't want you to use that. That's not to say that if you use it, suddenly you get a credit downgrade, but there's high visibility on something like that. Whereas your rate stabilization fund or budget stabilization fund, kind of the same thing, that is intended to be used. I like to think of that as sort of like in a 10-year period, you're going to see some cyclicality, and you do expect to use that. Different public utilities and such may use that fund a little differently depending on what their resources are and what is causing that fluctuation. Sometimes it would be if there is a drought, for example, and you have hydro generation, then you would release it in a dry year because you didn't get as much production as you wanted. Or if you had an outage on a generation unit, again, you might release something like that. In our case, as a CCA, our methodology is a little different than, say, a public utility. We're indexing to PG&E, so we have volatility that we experience as a result of that and some of the market procurements that we make. So the budget stabilization is something, the rate stabilization fund is something that we do anticipate using in a shorter time frame. In terms of funding that, we do want to fund towards both of that. We've generally focused more on the reserve policy historically, but of course we did cover the accounting on the rate stabilization, so we certainly have put funds there. I do want to look at a longer term horizon of how we'll fund things like reserve, rate stabilization, as well as local development, looking at a 5 to 10 year horizon and think about, even with some volatility, have some longer term trajectory as to how we want to fund each of these. And specific to the rate stabilization fund, we do have a policy, but we'll flesh that out a little bit more, and we'll actually present on that in the July-September timeframe as we also revisit the current surplus and how we may want to treat that. So we'll do that in conjunction.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, is it a unique suggestion that you're saying put all of the surplus this year back in the rate stabilization fund, given the volatility of the market? Because normally when we put at least half of that in the
we would, and that will absolutely be part of that July, what we anticipate to be a July discussion. We're putting materials together on that and on a few different options for what we might want to do as an adjustment to allocation of that surplus. Some or a portion of the rate stabilization into other buckets, and we'll present that and talk about some of the pros and cons there, of course.
Okay, great. Yeah. And then the other thing, if you'll allow me, Chair, the other question is about the value proposition. I know you had the slide where you suggested what kind of savings we could realize if we adjusted that. I sort of want to see that as last case, scenario. So are you just putting it out there as like the kind of levers we could pull in the future, that we're not suggesting that or even sort of looking at that, like going to the...
That's right. Yeah. And I know that we had discussed in XCOM just the fact that we have seen our value proposition adjust over time, as low as 1% earlier, and obviously in recent years increasing to 5%, which has been very positive and really important for us to highlight. And I think we heard the feedback pretty loud and clear. I think generally the feedback from the last meeting was, do that as a last resort. So we did not incorporate any changes there. But obviously, it is a tool, and to the extent you're experiencing a deficit year after year, it is worth considering what those adjustments, utilization of that tool would quantify to be at least. And of course, I always use this opportunity to highlight, yes, we do. We take that adjustment very seriously in thinking about what are the impacts to our customers. And it is important to highlight our rate forecast for 2026 is coming down very materially from where it is in 2025. So while we're looking at a deficit and we're thinking about, this tool, it's also important to think about what is the end result to the customer. Rates are coming down, and so they will be burdened less, at least from the generation portion of their bill. So we always want to think about that in context with rates. As we've been in some high rate years, we increase the discount. As things as project lower, would we consider lowering that discount if this were to continue on for a number of years, and how you would use that tool?
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
I can see why we don't sit next to each other often with the mic.
Additional questions, Dublin, excuse me.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, thank you, Board Member Roche, because you were on the same page as me with the questions around the Budget Stabilization Fund. So if I may, I'll stay on that for just one extra question. I heard that that fund is a reserve. Therefore, when we do the 35 million debit against it, what will we end up with? And then because it's a reserve, there's a floor. How close are we to the floor?
Show the slide.
You can go to slide 17, but let me just clarify. I'm not sure if I misspoke, but it is not a reserve. It is coming from the Rate Stabilization Fund, which is separate from the reserve. So they're two distinct areas. So our reserve is not an accounting treatment fund. It is a cash-related fund.
Okay.
We have about $330 million in our reserve fund. What we're talking about here is our Rate Stabilization Fund, or our GASB 62, which is a revenue deferral fund and cash, and is separate and distinct from the reserve fund. So I'm not, with this recommendation, there is no ask to make any adjustment or utilization of the reserve fund itself, simply the Rate Stabilization Fund.
Then I apologize, because I am reading here, it says we will utilize a 35 million, utilization of 35 million from the Budget Stabilization Fund.
Yes, and I'm sorry that we've been interchangeably using rate stabilization and budget stabilization.
I see, okay.
That may be a modest update we'll make in the policy refers to as a budget stabilization, but it really is a rate stabilization fund in practical purposes. So we use that interchangeably, but that is distinct from the reserve fund.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Additional questions, Berkeley?
Of course. Okay. These first two questions, let me know if they're appropriate to ask on this agenda item. I think this, since you mentioned PCIA, I'm just wondering if I could get a quick update on our advocacy efforts around this issue at the CPUC, and whether the CPUC, there's a plan to consider the impacts to CCAs, which are very serious.
Absolutely. We spend a lot of our resources on PCIA, as you can imagine. It's really critical that we are advocating for what is best for our customers with the CPUC on the various proceedings, and there are numerous proceedings. We've unfortunately had to revisit PCIA its sort of methodology a number of times. It looks like we will continue to do so. AVA resources that both in terms of staff and consulting work. Our trade association, CalCCA, does as well, heavily focused on PCA, and of course other CCAs individually also incorporate. So it's a very collaborative process, and so we are very actively engaged. I did note we did file comments on the proposed decision itself. This is phase one of this particular PCI proceeding, and there will also be a phase two that will look at this more broadly, not just on RA, but other products like market Brown Power, as well as the RPS components that will initiate in 2026 and be a multi-year process. But for this particular proceeding and the proposed decision, we did file comments. We did also engage with some of the community-based organizations locally, engage directly with legislators on it. So we are active on many fronts, not just directly with the CPUC. We'll see if we're successful or not. This is a pretty tight window of time to file comments and advocate directly with the CPUC, and we'll see in just a matter of a week, not even a week, on how that will play out, whether there could be potential delay on it. If it's passed, I think there's some other considerations that we would take just in terms of what follow-up activity could we have on this particular phase, not even talking about phase 2 in terms of potential rehearings, appeals, things like that. I won't go into that detail right now, but certainly there are those considerations as well.
And sorry, June 23rd, unless they called the decision as the proposed date. Is it in print yet?
The proposed decision is in print.
Yeah.
That was filed, that was
They-
released on the
They
23rd of May.
sometimes, well, anyway, we can talk after, just sometimes they publish the decision ahead.
There's no decision that's been published, so I think, yeah, so anyways, it's just the proposed decision right now.
Okay, on the budget itself, I just wanted to make sure I understand. First of all, so there is a $187 million difference, decline in the budget. I'm curious how much of that is due to market energy increases versus the variation in the PCIA.
That 187 is related to the PCI reform alone.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a separate figure related to market price energy. Yeah.
Okay.
But it is exacerbated by those two components. Yeah.
And then the wanted to just, sorry if I missed this, the difference between the upside scenario and the base case, what assumptions went into the differentiation between those two?
It's based off of the market price benchmark, so Brown Power and RPS prices. So RA is assumed to be the same actually in those two scenarios because of the reform. We have a sense and a forecast of what we think that will come out to be. But for market price, market price benchmarks for Brown Power and RPS is where we've made different assumptions there. Expenses are exactly the same, exactly. So those two different components on MPBs drive differences in rates and PCIA. Where that will actualize is where, it's really hard to predict, of course. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that was helpful. I'm almost done. I just have some questions about the power content labels. First of all, I was actually surprised. I didn't realize biomass and biogas counts as renewable under by choice, and I guess PG&E. That's but I wanted to understand. So nuclear with PG&E is 63% because they banked.
No, the banking is just related to renewable energy, and that's related to RPS compliance. This is power content label, so this is purely what they generated and are utilizing for 2024 calendar year. There's no banking of sorts for any other energy product other than renewable energy, since there's a compliance obligation there. So nuclear is just, I think what's noteworthy is that they have more generation than they have load as a result of the departure of CCAs.
Yeah.
And so they have some flexibility of saying, well, we'll choose this zero GHG generation as opposed to natural gas generation. So they don't disclose all of their natural gas in their power content label.
And that's what may lead to, in future years, them using less nuclear as a percentage and more.
Yeah. So as a reminder, for
gas.
2025, AVA has accepted a nuclear allocation, and a number of CCAs have as well. So we will see that number drop from where it is today, and you would assume on the PG&E side, and you would assume natural gas will likely fill that void. But again, they don't disclose all of their generation, so we can't actually say exactly how much natural gas they have in their portfolio.
Thank you. And then can you remind me, well, first of all, I was really glad to see such, so I remember in years past, some have made the claim that our nuclear-free content, our carbon-free content may have been less than PG&E's in some years. I have not evaluated the veracity of that statement, but it's exciting to see an almost 40% increase. So my question is, when, as we're projecting to go to, I think you said slice of, or just continuous evaluation of power content instead of annual, is that going to be a requirement that PG&E will and other IOUs will also be required to do?
Are you referring to this kind of multi-year compliance period procurement methodology?
Yeah.
So currently there is this compliance period methodology is utilized for RPS compliance. So that's been in place. That's been in place for probably since its implementation, I think, and that is to allow for load serving entities to manage the compliance obligation related to intermittent resources. So in the next slide from this, you can kind of see that graph in the bottom right kind of show, I know it's difficult to read, but that shows over a course of time is the x-axis, and you can see how that increases over time to step up procurement levels, but it also covers multiple years in terms of its band. So that is in place, and that's an example why, if you go back to the next slide, you can, sorry, the previous slide, slide 15, you can see PG&E's number is 23%. That is below the RPS requirement for 2024. The RPS requirement is something like 45% or something like, I think I'm going to probably get that number wrong, but it's definitely below. And it's because it's utilizing banked RECs to meet that compliance obligation, even though it actually was generated in a previous year.
If I may, I've asked that staff agendize the power content label for a future meeting anyways. It's been an item that we used to have to board certify in the past, but we're now using an exterior auditor to do. So given it's the budget conversation, it's an element, but power content label will probably come back. And I think we were saying September or so, just based on the agendized items we have. So
Thank you. I'm complete.
okay. Any additional questions by members in the room at this time? Okay. Any questions by members online at this time? San Leandro at 10:17 p.m.
10:17 p.m. Here we go. I'm going to try to keep it really quick. First,
That's super quick. You're on mute.
well, there we go. Let's try this. Is that working?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I pushed another window at the same time. So rate stabilization fund, that's a deferred revenue fund, which would mean, if I understand correctly, that we actually wouldn't recognize it as revenue in our top line? Or do we recognize it and then it kind of somehow gets shoved to the side?
Yeah, so to the extent for this fiscal period, 24-25, that's about to end, we have a strong surplus. If we were to allocate, let's just say hypothetically, all of that into a rate stabilization fund, a revenue deferral fund, then it would not show up on our financial statements. For next fiscal year,
as revenue.
as revenue, correct.
Perfect. Okay, that's a simple question. Thank you. So thank you about that. So this is going to be just a summary in the form of a question, because I just want to make sure that I understand it. Lots of information that we've seen lots of times, but I think it boils down to this, and tell me if I'm wrong. We are in a tough, for a number of years, we had the benefit of rising energy prices and falling PCIA, which led us to have large surpluses. We put a lot of that surplus into reserve and some into the rate stabilization fund because we knew that one day this would reverse. And if I'm understanding the budget correctly, it has now reversed. The CPUC has said PCIA needs to rise, and we're seeing market softening, which means energy prices are coming down, which is for us a double whammy. And that's why we're, quote unquote, facing a challenge headwind. Was that the basic summarize the whole thing?
That is correct. Very good.
Okay. And this year in particular, we have a surplus. But you're suggesting hey, let's face the truth that we know that we're sailing into this headwind. And so let's take that surplus and put it as deferred revenue for the benefit of the next fiscal year.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions, Chair.
Okay, although we'll point out that we're currently in the fiscal year, so that's still going to be staff recommendation on how to eventually handle that surplus.
Actually, one other comment I'll make is there's a number of things that are compressing our headroom going to 26. We talked about PCI reform, of course. The other is that 26 rates are forecast at a lower level. The other important thing that I didn't quite highlight is 2025 rates are actualizing at lower levels right now. And so there's a true up for 2025 that's also incorporated in here that's unrelated to PCI reform that is typical in any year. You know, you forecast a certain year, prices are different. In this case, prices are somewhat softer than what was forecasted. And so that means next year, your rates are both softer because when you have softer prices right now, chances are your forecast for next year, your prices are softer and therefore your rates are softer. But it also incorporates a true up for 2025 actualizing at a softer level. So in some sense, you're over collecting in 25 and you're under collecting 26 to balance that out. And that's a really important factor. That's a normal thing to happen for rate setting because you're never going to get it perfect.
Thank you.
Any additional questions by members online at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and go to public comments on this item. So if you would like to speak on item number 6, our draft budget, and you are in the room, please approach the podium at this time. You'll be limited to 2 minutes. Yep. Adrian, are you ready? Yes. Okay. Welcome.
Right. No, first of all, thank you so much for that presentation. Extremely detailed, very helpful to have all of that. Ayla Paz, on behalf of Local Clean Energy Alliance, I wanted to highlight that we really want the board to support the CAC's vote and support their resolution to make sure that part of this is really pushing on litigation, really making sure that we're putting a lot of effort and resources and time into the sort of legal process of fighting this, just because, again, this is really directly attacking AVA and CCA's in general ability to exist. And so that part, and then as well as making sure that there is reinvestment in the LDBP should the outcome be better. I know, again, one of AVA's core principles is this reinvestment into communities, and I think that's one of the parts that I personally, as an AVA customer and as also part of Local Clean Energy Alliance, that I think is such a unique and important part of what AVA does, is the LDBP. And I really think that even in times of financial stress and uncertainty, there should be a commitment to these community programs. And then also just wanted to emphasize again, Local Clean Energy Alliance has been advocating for this kind of engagement and advocacy since the beginning. And yeah, again, I think that there's just, this is a moment where AVA really needs to engage and not engage both on a legal front on making sure that we fight this as much as possible and also engage with the LBDP, too many consonants, and making sure that there is continued commitment to community programming. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional speakers at this time? Well, CAC will be after public comment. Yeah. All right, seeing none in the room, we'll go online. Are there any virtual public speakers?
Yes. Thank you. Bradley Cleveland, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Bradley Cleveland. I'm an Oakland resident and a consultant with IBEW Local 595, the Electrical Workers Union. We are a member of the Alliance for Workforce and Environmental Justice. The Alliance sent a letter to the board. It focuses on the local development fund specifically. I don't want to read that letter. Hopefully you'll have a chance to look it over, but I do want to emphasize a couple of points. First, we support the recommendation to contribute $10 million to the local development fund for next fiscal year. While we wish it could be larger, it does demonstrate a commitment to the fund, even in the face of AVA's significant budget deficit. We're hoping if during a mid-year budget review, if the situation has improved, we ask that you prioritize additional contributions to the fund, if that's possible. Second, over the long term, we ask that you adequately fund both the reserve and the rate or budget stabilization fund to help insulate the local development fund from this budget uncertainty. And finally, unrelated to the budget directly, I attended one of the board meetings where staff reviewed the investments that AVA has made that's been financed by the local development fund over the last 5 years. And it's really quite impressive what AVA has accomplished with the fund. And we understand the staff is now proposing to launch a planning process for the next local development investment plan. And we're looking forward to participating in that planning process along with other stakeholders and AVA staff and board. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jessica Tovar, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Hi, this is Jessica Tovar with the local Clean Energy Alliance and also the People Clean Power Alliance. I wanted to just mention, I noticed on the presentation today that it was mentioned that the CPU would be voting on the PCIA on the 23rd. And it's actually on the agenda for the 26th. So correct me if I'm wrong, it's supposed to be voted on the Thursday, June 26th, not the 23rd. And then in addition to that, I support what has been said already. You know, the local development business plan really is the heart of the commitment of this agency to building up assets. But one of my other points in the letter I would highlight about is the potential of this agency actually contributing to like a fold of interest fund with some of the local community foundations, East Bay Community Foundation and San Joaquin Community Foundation. I did highlight a precedent where San Diego's Community Trust Program actually gives money annually to the local foundations. And it's actually unrestricted money, but it's mostly centered around community innovation, resilience, sustainability, and workforce. And we need grants like that for community groups. The current program that you all have is really to roll out community engagement and working with the agency, but there's also monies needed for community organizing and projects. So I wanted to highlight that. Clean power to the people. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further hands raised at this time.
All right, are there any public comments at any satellite locations? Seeing none, we'll close public comment on item number 6 and bring it back to the board for any deliberations. I'd like to get CAC to let us know their perspective on it. So if you don't mind, go ahead. Yeah, because you don't have the time frame constraint, CAC. So.
I'll try and keep it.
No problem. Welcome.
The CAC did vote to support unanimously the budget with a little amendments and thoughts. Again, we were talking about the LDBP going from 25 million to 10 million. And we really believe that in the LDBP, we really believe in development, and that's our whole purpose here. We don't want to see that money go away. The other issues that we're feeling is there's going to be cuts if we're on the downside or whatever the standard, not the upside, on the proposals for the heat pump water heaters. I want to remind everybody that we make money when we sell hot water heating with electric, so we do want to move towards heat pumps and away from gas appliances. Yeah, just wanted to say that the PCIA reforms are well underway. I think June 25th is the deadline. There is one deadline. and I want to read part of the letter that I'm hoping to send out, and maybe if Adrian can help us, we'll send out the template for making comments on the CPUC site. The comment, part of the comment is this change, the valuation window will change from 21 months to 4 years. And that is a seismic change that risks destabilizing California's retail energy markets and unfairly shifting costs to the community choice aggregators and their customers. The change here is not small. It is $1.4 billion worth of transfer from CCA's customers in 2026 alone. So, as I said, the one thing that we can do right now as individuals is make comments on the CPUC website and perhaps spread the word. So please see that in your inbox forthcoming. And that is everything that we, specifically, we were concerned about the heat pump water heater initiative and the local development business plan, which is the $15 million reduction, and also the reduction in our legal department. So there was a hit to that as well. So if we could kind of preserve our fight in our government, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so back to the board for any comments or motion in the room or online. Yeah, Hayward.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I do support the budget as staff presented it, and I just want to say that, I think this really hits home why there is this, why we maintain this large reserve balance. Because I think in the past, especially when I first got here, like a $330 million reserve sounds huge compared to our cities, right? Like what that means, and is that necessary, and should we be putting it back into the community? But I can see, I'm sort of grateful for obviously the stewardship that you've had here to get us there, because why now at times this is going to be becoming so important that we're going to continue to build those reserves. So I'm really glad to see that was so well thought out in the past to get us here. So I am supporting the budget in the way it is. So
Is that a motion?
sure, I will move. I will move the budget. Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion, a second or additional comment by any members in the room?
I'm happy to second.
Okay, please. Seconded. And Berkeley, comment, or you just wanted to try to?
Oh.
Grab the bank.
No,
Vice Chair Bartlett, apparently.
I'm glad you did, Madam Vice Chair. No, I too support the budget, and I wish to echo Director Roche's comments as well. I think this really lays bare the statewide fight that we are all in. $1.4 billion reduction to CCA statewide. I shudder to think what this is going to do to CCAs that are newer and have less abundant reserves. And even with us, $187 million, a reduction from 25 million to 10 million to the LDBP, 7 FTEs, fewer staff. I lay the $187 million deficit or that we have to plug this year, or reduction, squarely at the feet of PG&E and the CPUC. I thank members of the public and the community for being with us in this fight. I appreciate the collaboration. I know that there are always ways that we locally can continue to be responsive and arguably be more responsive to community needs. I do think that this budget, though, really reflects, given the tough choices that needed to be made, still our comments last month on the budget, as well as the advisory comments of the CAC. I'll be supporting the budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any additional comments by members in the room at this time? Seeing none by any member online at this time. Okay, seeing none, I'll just make a comment that I do really appreciate staff's additional time. Howard and I have spoken pretty extensively about this budget, the challenges we face as an agency, and frankly, how we forecast, because, I don't want it to be where we say, oh, we didn't see it coming and we didn't make changes now to address it. So staff was very willing to work through what those changes are that I was concerned with, so that I could gain comfort with it as well. And I think right now it's a prudent step to use the rate stabilization program at this time, but we need to be very careful how we do that, and also our reserve. So I think staff's taking that very much to heart, and already was. So it was good comfort. Okay, with that, we have a motion made and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Alameda County.
Aye.
Berkeley.
Aye.
Dublin.
Aye.
Emeryville.
Aye.
Hayward.
Aye.
Newark.
Aye.
San Joaquin County. San Joaquin County.
About that, yeah.
Thank you. San Leandro.
Aye.
Hold on one second. Union City.
Aye.
Yes, Tracy.
Oh, Tracy.
Aye.
Thank you. Union City. Piedmont.
Aye.
Pleasanton.
Aye.
Motion is affirmed.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that completes item 6. My intent is to keep going unless anyone needs a break at this time. Seeing none. Okay, we're going to keep going. So now we're going to consent agenda, which is items number 7 through 16. This is consent, so it can be passed by one motion of the board. Are there any questions of any item on consent by any members of the board? Any questions of any members online? Okay. Do we have any public comment on any item on consent, item number 7 through 16 in the room? Please approach the podium at this time. Okay. 2 minutes.
Hello again, board members. No, I just wanted to briefly highlight that a lot of the consent items, when it comes to the contracts being entered into, there is not a lot of transparency or a lot of information on how these contracts were selected, like the folks who are being contracted with. I looked at a few of them, and it just simply said that AVA staff had decided that they were the most that they were the most qualified for these contracts. And I think Local Clean Energy Alliance and a lot of community partners would really want a lot more transparency on how these contracts are selected, who the other possible people being possible places are, who the other possible organizations that are being evaluated are, especially when it comes into light of wanting to make sure that these are local contracts being entered into, that these are being evaluated fairly, or just understanding how these are being evaluated. Yeah, and I think that just increased transparency in contracts being entered into, whether in a consent agenda or otherwise. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any additional speakers in the room at this time for items 7 through 16 on consent? Seeing none online
There are no hands raised at this time.
and at any satellite locations. Seeing none, public comment is hereby closed on consent. Looking for a motion, Berkeley.
Apologies. Is it too late to ask one question?
It is not too late. to
Thank
ask.
you. And I reserve the right to make a motion after, but on item 15, can staff just confirm, will the third amendment confirmation letter be coming to the board once completed, or is this basically authorizing staff to continue negotiations and execute the agreement?
This is authorization to continue to negotiate and execute, so we will not bring it back.
Okay. Okay. Well, given I am comfortable with this as represented, I will move the consent calendar.
Okay, we have a motion made. Looking for a second. Seconded by Alameda County. Any further conversation before we proceed? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Great, thank you. Alameda County.
Aye.
Berkeley,
Aye.
Dublin,
Aye.
Emeryville,
Aye.
Hayward,
Aye.
Newark,
Aye.
San Joaquin County, San Joaquin County.
Yes.
Thank you. San Leandro,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
Union City,
Aye.
Piedmont,
Aye.
Pleasanton.
Aye.
The consent calendar is approved.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to the regular agenda, which is item number 17. This is the prepay financing approval action item, and I believe Russell is going to present for us. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Greetings, everyone. Rusty Mills, AVS CFO. Just want to hop into this, I guess, when we get the presentation pulled up. Here we go. Thank you, Adrian. I think we can go ahead and hop to the first slide. Previously, we did cover the background on prepay financing information, but a quick couple of comments to level set. The main purpose and goal for AVA when entering into these is to reduce the cost of power to serve our customers. IRS regulations allow for tax-exempt debt to be issued to prepay for power to serve load, creating an opportunity for LSCs like AVA to receive discounted power. The bond issuance provides funding at lower costs than would otherwise be obtained while borrowing from the taxable market for the funding recipient in the structure. And then receiving the lower funding costs provides the ability for the supplier to offer AVA a discounted power supply for existing and future PPAs. And critically important, bond investor risk is to the supplier and funding recipient that need to pay off the bonds, not AVA. Next slide. So AVA has entered into 3 prepays already, closing the first ever CCA prepay in 2021, and then followed it up with 2 more in subsequent years, 2022 and 2023. Morgan Stanley has served as a supplier and funding recipient for these 3 transactions, all similarly sized around $1 billion. With each transaction, AVA has made changes that optimize operation and settlement of these contracts. And lastly, on this slide, you see a list of the CCAs that have completed prepays, which has AVA in good company, and you can see these are a very critical tool to being able to provide discounts to our customers. Next slide. This graphic illustrates the benefits that AVA has enjoyed since issuing the first prepay, and power deliveries began shortly after. You can see how it ramps up. So as the deals were first structured, we had to layer in prepays as we went along signing new contracts. And cumulative savings now total almost $22 million through the end of 2024. And we currently enjoy between 12 and 15 million of annual savings from the 3 existing prepays. Now the deliveries of power within all 3 have ramped up. And then savings will continue to increase in the coming years after entering into additional prepays. Okay, next slide. So another quick review of the beneficial elements and some of the risks to these transactions. Essentially, we assign existing and future PPAs to an energy supplier and receive a discount on that already contracted power. All of the terms of the PPA remain unchanged. And the debt is issued by CCCFA, which is a conduit issuer, and is non-recourse to AVA and the CCCFA, meaning that it's not secured or guaranteed by AVA or its customers. In the event of termination of the prepay, the assignment agreement also terminates, and the PPA would revert back to its original counterparties. So AVA would continue to get its power. However, we would not continue to receive the discount. We would rather pay the PPA contracted price that we originally signed up for. We do have a small amount of out-of-pocket costs that may be at risk if the deal doesn't happen due to unforeseen market events, and there could be tax and regulatory risk to the deal needing to terminate if laws change. So let's go on to the next slide. I think this is where I will apologize to everybody. It's somewhat of an eye chart and very, very complex structure, but essentially I'll walk you through it in really quick form here. It's identical to the prior prepays with one addition to point out. Out to the box on the right, that's a new box on funding recipients. For diversification, the structure now includes funding recipients that are different from the entity that was the energy supplier. This is allowed for pricing benefits by involving a different entity than the bank that had been utilized exclusively in prior deals. But before moving on, just to highlight and reiterate AVA's role in these prepays, the two orange highlighted descriptions are where we participate. First, number 7 is the assigned PPAs. You can see the PPA box. Those are assigned to the supplier, either Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs. And then you can follow the arrows up to the energy supplier and then over to project participant. We are that project participant receiving all the energy from those assigned PPAs and essentially pay for that back through to the PPA counterparties. Next slide. So a bit on diversification. It's a way to mitigate risk when doing business, and certainly the finance, investment, and power business recognizes this. It's just good risk management, but also can be good for deal economics and demand. CCAs typically use the same supplier when they enter into these additional prepays, and counterparty risk can start to become a concern if too much volume is tied to one entity, too many eggs in one basket. That analogy would work here. By diversifying, AVA can better protect its risk to losing the discount if the supplier becomes insolvent or other unforeseen supply concerns impeding delivery from that single counterparty. On funding recipients, the new structure provides for that diversification I just mentioned. The funding recipient in these deals is the credit risk that investors are facing, so they are ultimately the risk to paying back the bondholders. So having someone other than Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley as the credit risk can create demand from investors, which can drive economics and provide greater savings to AVA and a greater result to a transaction. Next slide. This is a list of potential funding recipients that are actively seeking lower cost tax exempt funding from these prepaid deals. We are in the process of evaluating options with Morgan Stanley to choose the funding recipient that will provide the most optimal level of savings. And these are, as you can see, primarily large financial and insurance companies. On the right is a list of recent prepays that have utilized this structure since we last did a prepay in 2023. CCAs and POUs such as SMUD and TID have taken advantage of the better savings that can be captured by diversifying away from the major banks that were almost exclusively used before. So we feel like this is a really good improvement in the structure and will really help to drive savings for us in the future. The next slide. These next two slides are just a quick refresher and highlight the various documents and agreements that AVA needs to negotiate and sign. This list is most of the documents in the board package, and I apologize, it's a very, very thick and lengthy package, but there are a number of agreements contained within that group of documents. With our role as off-taker, most of these are related to power supply and the PPAs, including the power supply contract and the all-important assignment agreements that insert a new supplier for AVA into the PPA. And then likewise, on the next slide, these are the documents that CCCFA, as the legal entity responsible, must sign, and will receive these ahead of the CCCFA board meeting next week if we gain approval tonight from you. We include a couple of these, the trust indenture and prepaid agreements, into the board package so you could kind of see what the terms are to the bonds that are going to be sold. Next slide. One thing that I didn't mention back in April when we brought this item as an informational item that's very important to AVA's mission, I wanted to call this out for the board, is the green bond designation we will seek. Since the energy transition began accelerating a few years ago, a new class of investors has grown. So investors that focus on climate-related or sustainable investments really look for bonds whose proceeds align with their investment values. The demand for these bonds has taken off in the past 5 to 7 years, which can really also drive pricing benefits for the issuer. Proceeds can be certified as meeting green bond principles adopted by the investment industry. And as such, issuers like AVA engage a second-party verification entity that reviews our mission, our programs, and the use of proceeds, and then issues an opinion as to the qualification to be designated green. So we did get interviewed by Kestrel recently and talked about all the new programs and AVA's mission, and of course the PPAs that we want to assign into the deal. We've used Kestrel verifiers for each of the 3 prepays, and we'll again seek out designation to continue to align ourselves with green bond investing principles. And to close on the last slide, this is a quick timeline of the process we have followed this spring. If approved, we would seek CCCFA board approval next week and then be ready to move into the market shortly after that. So essentially, from you, we are seeking approval for 2 transactions, and the approval parameters in the resolution are as follows. We will have no more than 2 transactions before coming back for any additional prepays. The aggregate size will not exceed $1.25 billion on either transaction. Just as a note, we are modeling for around a $1 billion deal for each of them, similar to the prior 3 prepays, but the not to exceed will allow for slight market variations or investor demand for bonds that could have us slightly issue more than $1 billion, and we don't want to cap ourselves, so we put a not to exceed that's a little bit higher. And then the minimum discount we will accept is 8% for these transactions. We are hoping for as much as 10 to 11%, but we will not transact unless the discount is at least 8%. So with that, I will open it up for your discussion and questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will go with clarifying questions like standard process, clarifying questions by members in the room related to a $2.5 billion transaction. Yes, Piedmont, you have questions?
Thank you. I asked this question in ExecCom, and we had a conversation at that time, but I just wanted to ask it for the larger group. What if the tax landscape changes? Who bears the risk of these contracts?
I think that the risk then would fall on the issuer, CCCFA, but they're non-recourse. So what ends up happening is that the bonds would need to be paid off, and we would stop getting our discount. So there is no risk to AVA and no risk to CCCFA from a financial standpoint, from a tax regime change. Now, there is risk if there is, for some reason, tax exemption is lost by the issuer, and the investor may have, cause to come after the issuer for not being tax exempt. But that's a very small pinhole risk, and it hasn't happened yet with any of these prepays.
Okay, and so and the risk you're referring to would be borne by all the parties, or?
Yeah, well, the risk to that, to the tax exemption status being lost, is that we would stop losing the discount on any deals going forward.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Additional questions by members in the room at this time? Yeah, Dublin.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Rusty. Rusty and I had a few moments to catch up earlier this week, so I'm going to ask similarly a question that I asked him as well for clarification, Rusty. Could you walk us through what makes our bonds more attractive on the bond market than other bonds that are out there today? We do understand that there is a fairly saturated market, so just walk us through what makes us the belle at the ball.
So, yeah, I think as I highlighted, talking about green investors, obviously as a green bond, we are very attractive to those investors. Now, these particular bonds that we are selling are backed by the credit risk of one of the other companies that I showed on the funding recipient list. And for diversification purposes, investors want to diversify their risk inside of their bond portfolios. So if they don't have any exposure to a certain supplier or to a certain funding recipient yet within their portfolio, they will bid more aggressively. In other words, if they own too much credit risk to Morgan Stanley already. If we went out there with another bond deal that Morgan Stanley was the funding recipient, nothing against Morgan Stanley, but they may be saturated by investor demand, wouldn't be there. So introducing a new funding recipient drives demand because the bond investor wants to face different counterparties, different exposure. And that will allow them within their portfolio to say, okay, we'll pay a little bit more for that investor because we don't have any exposure to them. So they would bid more aggressively, and that impacts our savings. So the more they're willing to pay for the bonds, the bigger our discount can be.
And just to clarify, and energy is a safer bet than most.
What's that?
Energy, like just our industry is a safer bet than most in terms of bonds.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about credit risk and the ability to pay. And what we have here at AVA is we're building a company that has long-term load needs. So the fact that we are looking at purchasing power supply for a long term and serving customers for a long term makes our revenue source critical to these deals and also very enticing to investors.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay. Any additional questions by members in the room at this time? All right. Members online, San Leandro.
Rusty, thank you for taking the time to meet with me earlier this week, or I guess last week, and answer a lot of my questions. One question does come up from the slides, and where you've got the eye chart. I don't know if we can pull that eye chart back up. Again, I apologize for the background noise.
Slide 6, I believe. There are a couple of eye charts in this.
That one.
I apologize.
That one. Well done. So I'm trying to figure out, just as a matter of legal construct, the energy supplier is supplying, and I know they're not electrons, but in concept, they're supplying the electrons to CCCFA, who then supplies them to us? Or is it really a contract between us and the energy supplier directly?
Essentially, we are the off-taker, yes, but we do need to be separate and apart for tax-exempt status purposes.
Okay. So there's basically matching contracts for everything that CCCFA buys. We in turn agree to purchase it.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So CCCFA enters into a like agreement with the supplier.
Perfect. That's it for me. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any additional questions by members online at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and CAC, did you have any questions on this? I'm sorry, I'm at questions, but did you have any questions on it? Or we'll go to your report after public comment, sorry.
We haven't seen
The bond, okay.
so we don't have any.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for letting me know. All right, with that, we'll go to public comment on this item, which is item number 17, the prepay financing transaction. If you would like to speak on this item and you're in the room, please approach the podium at this time. Seeing none, online.
There are no hands raised at this time.
Thank you. And at any satellite location? Seeing none? Okay, public comment is hereby closed on item number 17. We'll bring it back to the board again for a $2.5 billion transaction. Should not be done lightly. I do appreciate people taking the time to work with staff beforehand. So with that, looking for a motion or action by the board.
I'll move that we authorize staff to enter the two prepaid transactions.
Thank you very much. A motion
Happy to
made.
second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Union City, seconded by Hayward. Any further comments before we take a vote? Hearing none, seeing none. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Alameda County, Berkeley,
Aye.
Dublin,
Aye.
Emeryville,
Aye.
Fremont, Hayward,
Aye.
Newark,
Aye.
San Joaquin County. San Joaquin County?
Yes.
Thank you. San Leandro,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
Union City,
Aye.
Piedmont,
Aye.
Pleasanton.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. With that, we are completed with item number 17, and we'll be proceeding to item 18, board member and staff announcements, including requests to place things on a future board agenda. Staff, since I went so fast last time, do you have anything you'd like to announce?
This is less of an announcement, but just a general thank you to my staff because there's a lot going on right now. These two items today obviously were very meaty items. So thanks to Rusty and Jason, the team, for the work on the budget and obviously on the prepaid as well. Tons of legal items going about, and then of course tons of policy, legislative, and regulatory matters that are very active right now. The list could certainly go on. I can thank every team at AVA, and I should, but I'll stop there and just thank staff as a whole for all the hard work right now. It's a very busy time of year.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll also just mention, and I meant to do it while we were still in the item, but the resolution that was in the initial draft of the package did update, and that update was posted Monday morning. So depending on when you downloaded the package, but the resolution in the printed packages for our board members here is accurate. So just a heads up, there was a clerical error that we caught over the weekend. That was on the prepaid transaction. The resolution had Alameda County listed twice, and San Joaquin County was MIA. So we caught that in our detailed review. All right. Any other announcements by board members? Yes, Piedmont.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that Juneteenth is tomorrow. It's both a federal holiday and an opportunity for us to reflect on our country's history and recommit ourselves to advancing liberty and equity for all of our citizens.
Thank you very much. Okay, I just have a few myself as well. First and foremost, please don't forget that the next, San Leandro, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. We're almost done. Very quickly, thank you, Ava, for coming to the San Leandro Cherry Festival and for supporting and having a booth and all that kind of good stuff and sharing the good news to San Leandro residents. Thank you, Vice Chair, for reminding us about Juneteenth also. For future agenda, I know that it's not within our purview to set PG&E's rates. We don't control 70% of the price of electricity. Got it. But I do believe that residents, participants, just think about the price of electricity. And that's just, we just live in that reality. And so I think that having some sort of discussion at the board level or at a committee level about how we can be better educating, what's the right level of advocacy, what's the right level of education, just that whole thing. I think there's a there. I can't quite formulate it, but I think that we can't just say, well, we're not the cause of your high electricity rates because we're lumped in. So I kind of toss that out as a mushy request or some sort of future discussion at either committee or at the board. Similarly, I know that with the addition of Fremont that we've already approved into the R100, there had been some discussion, potentially I think about some expansion in some other cities. Just making sure that we discuss either at the board or again at committee, which is probably a better place, what some of those potential exposures are and what the consequences could be. I know that that topic did not come up as part of the board budget discussion, but I just want to make sure that we don't lose track of it. So that's my second request for an item. And then the third just comment is that I will be sending, or I have referred an organization, Third Act, to AVA. They will be holding a SUN, S-U-N, Day event on September 21st. This year it's actually going to be in San Leandro, but it really is focusing on solar, wind, renewables in general. And to the extent that there's the opportunity to support the partner to show up to this festival that's part of a national movement, I would encourage the team to think about it and see if they can make it. That's all that I have, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Hayward?
Just a quick one because Member Anderson reminded me that in light of Juneteenth, Hayward is hosting a Juneteenth event on Saturday from 2 to 6 p.m. in our Heritage Plaza, which is right downtown Hayward. And we would love for anyone to come who wants to come to Hayward. Thank you.
Okay. Any other announcements by any other members?
could get long.
Okay, and then I'll just mention the content label will be coming back already. It's already on the plan for later this year, so we can take a look at that. Okay, so like I was initially on track to say, the next meeting is at the Rotunda building, so not here, as AVA headquarters goes under a bit. And then I've got something I'm going to read, and I wrote it out just so I make sure I say everything. I think AVA is an amazing organization, extremely talented individuals, contributed to by the success of the staff and the board. The goal has really been over the past few years to build the bench of the electeds, because every election we seem to get gutted. And so Howard and I have been really focused on trying to figure out how to build the education, but also build the bench, right? But it's very unusual what I'm about to do, so I'm trying to announce it now for July. It has become quickly apparent through my work with Howard that remaining as chairperson through the end of my term, which would be February, will create a challenge for AVA in November of 26, because our current vice chair will be completing her term of service in Piedmont. So that would leave AVA with a brand new chair and vice chair pretty quickly. So I know it takes time to learn all of this. And so therefore, after talking with Howard and Inder and the vice chair, I'm announcing my intent to vacate the chairpersonship at our July meeting, and staff has been asked to present on the agenda chair and vice chair appointments at that time. It's my sincere hope by taking this step that we will elevate AVA's ability to continue the board's bench and support the organization in 26 and beyond. So this move requires or allows that to happen. With me sitting through my term, it would not. Betsy's edited my comments here, so I'm trying to read her writing, but I'm not planning to leave the board, but the goal is to actually provide an orderly chairpersonship for the board, because we have not had that over my service time, and I haven't served terribly long here. So with that, I'll take the moment to say 6 things I think are pretty crazy that happened in the 18 or so months I've been chair. Nuclear allocation. Power content label is now audited instead of board certified. We hired a new CEO, and we had his first year review. We adopted 2 budgets, the most recent one just now, so the budget's done. We just approved $2.5 billion to save JPA members $20 to $21 million annually. And we expanded the board to bring on new territory and now have 18 members. So with that, it's an honor to serve alongside of all of you. We will have on the July agenda chair and vice chair appointments. Thank you very much. With that, this meeting is adjourned.